Have you ever walked out of a long lecture, felt like, okay, I got that, but then maybe a week later realized most of it just vanished?
Oh, absolutely. Or, watched a really slick presentation, nodded along the whole time,
Right.
and then trying to actually use that information.
Mhm.
Suddenly it's like, wait, how does this apply?
Exactly. And look, this isn't really a problem with you.
Yeah.
It's about something pretty fundamental in how we've traditionally done education. Our sources today have this provocative name for it, talking schools.
That exact feeling, the information just slipping away, that gap between hearing something and, well, truly knowing it. That's really the core of our deep dive today.
Hmm.
We're digging into that traditional model where basically the teacher does most of the talking. They're the main transmitter of knowledge, mostly just through, speaking.
And this deep dive, it's built on some really fascinating research excerpts. It's called Breaking the Mold of Talking Schools by Shiva Narayan Taxshila Page. And it's not just pointing fingers at what's wrong.
No, not at all.
It's more a profound look into the future, into how our brains actually learn best. So our mission today, we want to cut through the jargon, pull out the really powerful insights from these sources. Some might even surprise you.
Yeah.
We want to show why this age-old method is being seriously reevaluated and what some of the really revolutionary alternatives look like.
And this isn't just theory, right?
No way. This matters to you. Whether you're a student trying to, really grasp things, or a parent thinking about your kid's education, or honestly, just anyone curious about how learning actually works effectively, get ready for a few aha moments, I think.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's kick things off. When the research talks about talking schools, what exactly are they defining? What's that blueprint look like?
Well, at its heart, a talking school is basically that classroom model where lectures are dominant. Textbook guided delivery, but mostly lecture. And often this means students are pretty passive.
Passive, okay.
Yeah. And the research points out this isn't some new invention. It's like deeply rooted in centuries of educational custom, where the spoken word was just king, the main way to pass on knowledge.
Right, the oral tradition almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about it. Teacher explains, goes over things, maybe asks a few questions here and there.
Yeah.
And the students, they're listening, taking notes, trying to remember what they heard for the test.
Okay, so if we kind of pull back the curtain, what are the main defining characteristics of this model, according to the sources?
Well, a huge one is verbal dominance. Like we said, spoken words are the main way content gets delivered. Overwhelmingly so.
Right.
It's also fundamentally teacher-centered. The teacher is by far the most active person in the room. Students. Mostly passive recipients.
Receiving info.
Exactly. And while, textbooks are there, they usually just support what the teacher said.
Yeah.
They don't really lead the inquiry.
Gotcha. They back up the lecture.
Precisely. And this often shifts the focus to memorization over actual mastery. The goal becomes recalling facts, not necessarily deeply understanding or integrating the knowledge.
Makes sense.
And finally, there's generally limited student agency. What that means is there aren't many chances for learners to really drive their own learning, through exploring stuff, experimenting, or even just working things out with peers.
Yeah.
It's very much a one-way street, typically.
That description, that definitely resonates. Thinking back to my own school days for sure. But okay, what does this actually mean for the learner, like in the long run? What are the limitations the research really flags?
This is where the criticism in the research really hits home. It argues that without that active, hands-on learning, without grappling with real problems, the learning just stays superficial.
Superficial, okay.
Yeah, the knowledge doesn't get internalized deeply. And that has a really critical knock-on effect.
Yeah.
Poor knowledge transfer. Meaning, what you learn in that lecture setting, in that one context, you might really struggle to apply it effectively when you face a different kind of problem or just a real-life situation.
Right, it stays kind of locked in the classroom.
Sort of, yeah. And maybe even more startling, the research suggests that just passively listening, within a few days, retention rates can plummet. We're talking sometimes less than 20%.
Wow, less than 20%. That's incredibly eye-opening. That's huge.
It is. It's not just inefficient. It suggests a fundamental mismatch with how our brains seem to be wired for remembering things long-term.
And I think we've all felt this next one. Reduced student engagement. Just sitting and passively listening for long periods. It can, leads to boredom pretty quickly. Distraction, just feeling disconnected.
Absolutely. Who hasn't stared out the window during a long lecture?
Larry.
And the research also points to this tendency towards imitation over innovation. Students might get good at mirroring the teacher's answers or phrasing, but not necessarily forming their own critical ideas. This can also breed dependency, relying constantly on the teacher to explain things, which doesn't exactly encourage independent thinking.
Right. It keeps the training wheels on, maybe.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And another really big point they make is the limited multisensory engagement. Think about it, it's mostly auditory. There's often a lack of physical, hands-on activity or even strong visual or spatial tasks. And that means we're not activating all the different learning pathways in the brain that really help with deep processing.
So wait, this isn't just about like how well students do on a test next week. It's about how their brains are actually being wired or maybe not wired for future learning and problem solving. That feels much deeper.
Exactly. That's a key point in the sources. They draw this direct line to cognitive neuroscience.
Yeah.
Passive listening without that active experiential piece seems to lead to shallower processing or knowledge transfer. And this is really highlighted in studies from cognitive neuroscience and also this field called student motor learnography, basically, how physical action impacts learning.
Motor learnography, interesting.
Yeah. And why does this matter now? Because those 21st century skills, everyone talks about creativity, critical thinking, complex problem solving, they demand a much deeper, more active kind of engagement with knowledge than these traditional talking schools usually foster. It's really about building flexible neural pathways, not just, filling a bucket with facts.
Okay. But if these limitations are so clear and the science seems pretty compelling, why? Why do these talking schools still dominate so much of education? It feels like a bit of a puzzle.
It does, doesn't it? And that's the million-dollar question, really. The research points to several practical, maybe often overlooked reasons. First off, there's a certain efficiency in content delivery. Let's be honest.
Right. One teacher, many students.
Exactly. One teacher can cover a lot of ground, material-wise, with a large group fairly quickly. Secondly, there's predictability and control. The teacher directs the flow, which ensures a kind of uniformity. It feels orderly, manageable.
Okay, structure.
Structure, yeah. And maybe the biggest factor, just sheer tradition and familiarity. This model is so deeply embedded in education systems globally. It's what generations of students, parents, educators, it's what we know. So it becomes the default. It offers this kind of comfortable status quo, even if we know it's not always the most effective.
I can definitely see that. It is the classroom most of us probably remember, right? And there's a comfort in that familiarity, even if, maybe it wasn't always sparking the most excitement or deep learning.
True.
But this is where, for me, it gets really exciting because the neuroscience, and this research in particular, they point towards totally different approaches, much more active ones.
Oh, absolutely. And what's really fascinating is how the research builds this strong case for what's broadly called active learning. The idea is simple, really. Learning sticks best when students are actively involved.
Involved how?
Well, that means physical engagement, they call it motor learning, but also visual processing, so visual spatial learning, and even tapping into emotional connections to the material.
Okay.
These alternative models, they really emphasize knowledge transfer, actually being able to use the knowledge over just delivering a lesson. It's about learning by doing, not just listening.
Right.
And collaborative problem solving, working together instead of just relying on the teacher's explanation. And the big goal, long-term retention, making it stick. And they suggest specific ways to achieve that, like through something called space-guided cyclizide rehearsals and really leveraging that motor engagement piece.
Okay, hang on. Space-guided cyclizide rehearsals, that's a mouthful. Can you break that down a bit? What does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah, it sounds complex, but the core idea isn't too crazy. Think of space-guided as strategically spaced repetition. Not cramming, but revisiting material over time.
Okay, spaced repetition, I know that.
Right. And cyclocide rehearsals essentially adds an active, often physical or constructive element to that repetition. It's about truly cementing the knowledge through deliberate spaced practice that involves doing something with the information, not just rereading it.
Ah, okay. So maybe like if you're learning history, you don't just reread the chapter. You maybe build a timeline or act out a scene or teach it to someone else, and you do that periodically.
Exactly like that. It's integrating action and spacing. Like a musician practicing, they don't just listen once. They play sections, step away, come back, physically play again. It reinforces those neural pathways actively over time.
That's a great analogy. Makes sense. And the sources even mention specific models, right? Like the learnography model, where students become, what, miniature teachers?
Yeah, that's one example. In that model, students might create these condensed summaries or visual maps called brainpage modules from source material, and then actively transfer that knowledge through hands-on practice or teaching others.
Interesting. And then there are these broader concepts like brain page theory and motor science-based knowledge transfer. It really begs the question then, what does a classroom actually look like when it's not just about talking, when it's built around activating all these different learning pathways?
Well, it looks much more like a dynamic learning space, a workshop maybe, where learners are constantly, constructing knowledge, manipulating ideas, personalizing what they're
Some
learning,
less sitting and receiving.
and more doing, creating, interacting. Now, this doesn't mean the teacher disappears or never talks. Not at all.
Okay.
It's about shifting the balance. The teacher becomes more of a facilitator, a guide on the side, maybe a learning architect,
Mm.
rather than the sole sage on the stage.
A facilitator. I like that.
Yeah.
So instead of just getting information poured into them, students are actively building their own understanding.
Precisely. And the research offers some really concrete strategies for how to make this happen. Things like flipping the classroom.
Right, where students maybe watch a short lecture, read something before class.
Exactly. So that precious class time can be used for deeper stuff, discussions, group work, tackling complex problems together, guided by the teacher.
Okay, what else?
Introducing those brain page methods we touched on. Having students physically create these, highly condensed, often visual, personalized summaries or knowledge blueprints, that forces active processing and organizing. It could be drawing, mind mapping, building models, creating diagrams.
So making their thinking visible.
Yes, exactly, and making it active. Then there's using project-based and problem-based learning modules. This is big.
Where they tackle real-world challenges.
Yeah, often working in teams, grappling with messy, authentic problems. That's incredibly empowering compared to just answering questions at the end of the chapter. It builds so many skills at once.
That sounds like a huge shift.
It is. And another key strategy mentioned is actually replacing some traditional lecture time entirely with knowledge transfer tasks and opportunities for self-directed exploration.
Meaning?
Well, it could mean setting up miniature schools within the classroom or student-led learning teams where students are responsible for researching topics, teaching concepts to each other, and solving problems collaboratively. It puts the onus and the activity squarely on the learner.
Wow, so it's really flipping the script from teacher talk dominating everything to student activity and student thinking driving the learning.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
And it aligns perfectly with what we know about developing those crucial 21st century skills: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, and actually being able to apply knowledge.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together then. What we've unpacked today really shows that, look, traditional talking schools, they have their history, their reasons for sticking around, efficiency, familiarity.
Right.
But modern research, especially drawing from cognitive neuroscience, makes a really strong case for moving beyond just passive listening. It's pushing towards learning that's active, that's experiential, and much more student-centered.
And understanding these different approaches, these dynamics, it's crucial. It helps you, the listener, appreciate what truly effective learning can look like, whether that's for your own development, maybe learning a new skill for work, right?
Yeah.
Or thinking about your children's education and what kind of environment helps them thrive. Or even just satisfying that curiosity about how our amazing brains actually learn best. It helps to recognize that knowledge isn't something just poured into you.
Right.
It's something you have to actively construct.
So here's maybe a thought to carry forward from this deep dive today.
Yeah.
When you think about education, maybe ask not just what is being taught, but how the learning is happening. Advocate for classrooms for yourself, for your kids that really engage, that inspire, that activate that full learning potential. Let's maybe try to break the silence of just traditional teaching and really shift the spotlight away from only the teacher's voice and onto the learner's active brain.
Well said.
And maybe consider, how can you apply this learning by doing idea in your own life? How can you move from just passively hearing information to really experiencing it, constructing something with it, applying it? Because that's where the research suggests the real magic of deep, lasting learning happens.